Welcome back to Masterpiece Theatre. Today, we will be fixing a marble table.
Plant stand.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So, welcome again. Carlene from Standpipe Antiques.
I'm Cassie from PS Relics.
Do you remember the name of her company?
I did! I know. Meditation works. Anyway, so today we're going to be... Stop that. So today we're going to be painting a marble-topped plant stand or side table, depending on what you want to use it for. We're going to show you the step-by-step process. So we're going to show you, obviously we're going to tape it off. And then we have one that's kind of done already, so then we'll show you what the end effect is going to look like. We're going to use all the same paints and techniques that we used for the first one, so that you can, see how it works, start to finish.
I was actually thinking of hiding the fact that we already had one painted done.
Well, you can cut it out then.
So,
luckily we had two, we were able to do that. That's not always the case, though.
Exactly. First step, of course, is to prep your piece. So,
show you the table. Here's the table here. There you go. Yeah. Tweaking, not twerking. That's weird. Not really.
I would suggest you wipe it down. I mean, spiders are cool and everything, but spider webs in paint, not necessarily a good thing.
Sometimes it looks cool, but not for this particular piece that we're trying to use.
Try to avoid using soap. A little bit of water, a little bit of alcohol is fine, but you need to get that wag a little wetter. Wag a little wetter.
Okay, this is a family show. You need to stop with that.
Right? It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have surfaces that are painted, that are have poly coats. You're going to have all sorts of things wrong with it. It might be broken in a couple of spots. It's going to have staining. We've got
fix our screws down here.
Yeah, tighten some screws up. You're going to have these issues with any old furniture, and you have to learn how to work around them. So one of the issues with this particular plant stand that is going to make it better to paint.
Sorry, it's really dirty.
It was. I left it all for you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to need a screwdriver too, because these legs are coming
Oh, yeah. Anyway. I didn't bring a screwdriver with me.
Anywho.
So we'll need to do that.
Sounded like thunder.
Yeah, it's the
thunder.
Road up there.
Da, 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 da. Sorry.
My favorite rendition is still Two Cellos. Hilarious.
So,
got it?
I kind of got it all off there.
Okay. So one of the issues with this piece that is going to mean that it either has to be completely redone or we just paint it is this stain right here. You can see it right here.
Yeah, you can.
Somebody set, I don't know, something.
It's like a water spot or something.
Water spot or something, but it doesn't come off. It doesn't wipe off. I think it's damage to the poly. Probably was a little water, and the poly got damaged. It's one of the nice things about gator hide. It's a lot harder to do with gator hide. But because this top is also permanently attached to this by glue, and I say permanently because in order to get it off, I'm going to have to damage everything. I ain't doing that. So the first thing we're going to do is actually tape the underside of the marble top. You don't have to. And of course, the easiest way to do that is just to use a little painting tape. Some blue painting tape or green if you want to use the green. You've got choices. That is one of the hardest things of painting things is what do you do? I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I swear.
Gosh darn it.
I'm having issues painting.
Well, I'm trying to get it like between the wood and the marble.
Oh, you're not going to be able to do that. The glue's there. So just get it as close as you can. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. It just needs to be approximate. 0. There you go. Good boy. You just sit right there. Okay, so that's one edge done. So when we look at this, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but it does need to be right along the edge of the wood so that you have as little of the marble painted as possible, but you don't want to be on the wood. So if a little marble gets painted, it's fine. If a little wood gets unpainted, not fine.
Tape stuff.
Yeah?
Maybe.
If you want me to tape, I'll tape this side. Oh, it's beautiful. Gorgeous. Okay. So now that we have a tape, we've got to prep the surface. Now she's already cleaned it. There's a couple different things about prepping surfaces. In this particular case, what we're going to do is do a light sand on this. It's not necessary for most paint, chalk paint. However, anytime there's a shine to it, I prefer to do a light sand because if you're going to take that much effort to paint it, you might as well make sure it sticks. So to do the light sand, don't need much, 400 grit. Right there. You can do 320 is fine. You don't want to do anything too rough because the paint could potentially show the ridges. You don't have to sand perfect. There's no reason to. You don't have to get it in every crook and cranny. You don't have to do any of that. All you're doing is just roughing up the surface so that it sticks better. And it's mostly on those surfaces that are going to be touched a lot more. So outside edges are all that's needed, okay? And you want to do the whole piece. And this doesn't take long, but just get around the curve, do what she's doing. She's much more experienced at that than I am.
Again, family video.
This video is not for families.
Yeah. Takes a moment. Okay, so that's one pole. You got one pole over there. We got half of the poles done. There's a lot more sanding to be done. But once you have it sanded, okay, all you do is just take your damp rag that you cleaned it off with, it's fine, and just clean off any of the excess dust. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you're going to do white, you have to get it pristine on the dust. If you're doing any other color, it doesn't usually matter. You can see, well, you can kind of see right here, changes in the toning. This is not as shiny as it used to be compared to this one that hasn't been sanded. That's all you're looking for, is you're just needing just a touch of texture for the paint to stick. Okay, now everything is sanded down. It doesn't look that much difference, but it does have less shine than it used to. So the next step is choosing the color. People, there are over 100 colors to choose from. There are some chalk paints that you can tint yourself, and therefore you have an infinite amount of color selection. Infinite number of color selection. Almost infinite. It's really actually kind of finite. Anyway. And it's very seldom. Let's just say it that way. It's very seldom. Collard greens.
Doesn't look like collard greens, but it's pretty.
It's a nice color green. It's got a beautiful kind of piney tone to it. And I like green. I like greens lately. Okay. We're going to go over how to paint this thing. There are a couple of different... I yawned.
Anywho.
You can use almost any brush for this.
You should go over different brushes you can use.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the techniques of how to...
You should go over one right now.
Can you go over one?
Right now.
So chalk painting brushes are very specific. If you notice, they're kind of round. I've got several, although I only have this one here. Well, I've got this one as well. They're round. They've got these long flexible bristles. They're very, very, very nice brushes. They're also expensive. However, they are worth their money. If you paint with chalk paint with a cheap brush, you will not be happy. You don't have to use one of these specific $20 to $30 brushes. You don't have to use them. However, if you need to use a good quality brush, you need to find one with nice soft bristles, and it can be either natural or artificial, but it needs to be nice and soft. No stiff bristles. You get a lot. You'll see when you start painting with a stiff bristle brush, unless you like that texture, that's what you're going to get as texture. If you want nice and smooth, go with soft bristle. A chip brush, and a high quality chip brush is fine. Brushes you can find in your home improvement store are fine, but if you do this for long term, you're going to need to invest in one of these because you will find these are phenomenal. Now, a couple tips and tricks with brushing.
What's the difference in this brush and that brush?
So, this one
is
a little shorter bristle.
Here?
Same type of bristle, It's a shorter bristle. It's for getting into nooks and crannies and crevices that the soft bristles don't necessarily get into very easily.
You see, there's stuff in that one.
Yeah, they're stiff. Exactly. And so those are really good for getting into the places that are a little further away, crevices. After you get into the crevice, though, you want to go over with your regular brush to smooth it out because it is a stiffer bristle. So that's the difference between these two. And then that brush comes in multiple different sizes, and they all have basically the same bristles. They're just, my biggest one is, huge. And if I'm doing big pieces, that's the one I want to use. This is a dinky piece. We can use a medium brush.
It's not dinky.
I mean, it's sort of dinky. I mean, it's not a dresser or anything. Okay, so a couple of things to do before you start painting. So, hand me that water bottle. One of the things you want to have on hand is a water bottle. Yeah, I'll just put that over here. Is a water bottle. Now, the reason you want to use a water bottle is because these paints are very thick. Think of them as concentrates, and you do need to thin them out just a touch in order for them to go on very smooth. Otherwise, they'll dry chunky. Do you like chunky paint?
No.
Exactly. Unless you have sea spray in it. If you have sea spray, that's the look you want. You can use any sprayer. If you can find a misting sprayer, there's a couple of companies that have them. You can order them online. There's some nice misting sprayers. There's some that other furniture painters that you may be familiar with use. I do not have one of those. I've actually got a one I got from Tractor Supply, and it seems to work sufficient for me. This one's just my regular water sprayer for my brushes. So I like to wet my brush down. And generally all I do is just wet the base of the bristle down all the way around. And normally I don't squirt water everywhere. Today's an exception. And all that does is get the water into the brush at the top, and it will actually wick down to the bottom of the bristles. Every now and then I do the same thing. I go back in at the very top of my brush, just like this, although sort of like this, and I will spray it a little bit on either side, and that will keep my brush wet. That seems to be a technique that works well for me. You can also thin your paint down. I don't particularly care for doing that because I get it straight out of the can. This keeps it nice and moist. Again, you want a moist brush. You don't need a wet one, you want a moist one. The next thing is that this brush has been used to paint Queen Bee out of the DIY line, beautiful yellow color. And these are white normally. This one's now yellow. It'll turn blue when I paint blue. The green will turn it green. It's just the way that the pigments work. But what it will do is help you highlight where you want to put the paint. You don't really want to put the paint much higher than that. Just this top centimeter here, and that's it. The other thing you want to do is to just, when you get it out of the brush, just take all the excess paint from the outside, not the inside, just the outside. And that keeps it from dripping, flicking, anything like that. I'm going to dip it in, just get the paint from the outside. And if you notice, the outside of the brush doesn't have that much paint, but the inside has a good sufficient amount of paint. This stuff dries fast. Don't leave ridges, drips to do later. You will regret it. You will have ridges and drips and everything. When you're doing a circular surface, this is where this comes into importance. So I generally will do and paint down, and then I actually paint my circular surfaces like this. And what that does is it gives me a beveled edge on either side, and then I can move around and just keep flicking it. And I will get the entire paint surface coated without having any ridges. It just kind of bevels around. And so if I could let this dry, come back the next day and paint the other side of this, and you wouldn't even be able to tell. Tricks and tips. Ta-da. Then when you run out of paint, you just dip your brush again, get the excess off of the outside. There you go. And then continue on painting.
You always paint the bottom.
Yeah, you can paint the bottom, middle, side, tops. The trick is to get the whole entire surface coated. Now, you don't necessarily have to coat the bottom under here. I tend to do so because I like to not even, people look underneath. I don't paint the inside, but I will typically paint this bottom ridge here. Again, not necessary. It's just one of those things that I tend to do.
This is a nice army green type color too.
Yeah, it's a nice army green. It's got that good kind of olivey tone to it. It's slightly brown.
Yeah.
Kind of a browny green.
Which is what you love. brown.
Oh yeah, I love brown. But part of the reason I like to paint furniture is because as much as I love wood and I love the textures of wood, I'm not that much of a brown person. So
no one show my husband this video. He hates it when people paint stuff.
he does. And it's hilarious.
And if any of you have met my husband, which if you know my company, you have met him, he will not paint a piece of furniture.
No,
Really that's for sad. Other people to do.
It is. That's why we're doing it here.
And that's why we have people that do that. We pay people that do that.
Yep. So one way to smooth out a coat as you go is that once it dries just a little bit, you do what I call a fairy touch over it. I don't know what to call it. It's a very light brushing with the brush over the surface, and it smooths out any of those excess paint, kind of moves any excess paint around. But you have to do it when it's just slightly dry. If it's too dry, you'll get an issue with the paint chunking instead. And at that point, you need to wet it down and just mist it. And you may be able to salvage that. Otherwise, you'll have to just put another coat over it that's a little thicker so that it fixes that issue. But you do a little bit of a light touch over it, and you get a nice smooth coat. What the...
Some coffee.
Sorry, apparently. I can flick it a little bit more.
Sorry.
So there you go. So if you grab the end of your brush, you don't hurt the bristles at all, and it's in a nice little pocket until you need it. So this is a good way to set it down, especially with Dixie Belle paints. DIY, it's not so important. Dixie Belle, always make sure your brush is covered, and never leave it for more than a day with the paint on it, preferably because you need a wet brush or a damp brush to paint anyway. You wash it that same day. You don't want to ruin these brushes. They're expensive. Got it?
Also, if you don't have any plastic gloves, you can use a plastic bag too.
Yeah, you can use any sort of plastic. This just makes it to where I can take this and put my fingers back into it and have my glove back, and I'll have the paintbrush saved. Okay. So, as she gave away the surprise earlier, we had two of them. I've already painted this one. This has 2 coats of Dixie Belle. I always recommend 2 coats because the first coat I put on a little thinner than the second coat. So the first coat generally has pieces showing through from the under color, like the wood or any color that the piece used to be before. And so the second coat will completely hide that. It's a nice, beautiful coat. Now, this is Dixie Belle. It doesn't require anything more than this, but it's kind of plain.
Yeah, it needs a little something.
Needs a little something.
Yeah.
Okay. We're dealing with a nice marble top plant stand or side table or lamp stand or whatever it is you want to use it for. So it needs to have a little something. Now, you don't have to sand it at this point, but if you choose to do so, you can. And you get, again, light coat of 400 grit, and you just do it. Now there may be some areas you want sanded more than others, like this here is a long thin piece. This here doesn't necessarily make any difference, and you want to sand it, and you just do a really light sand with the 400. If you want to distress it, you do an addition, more sanding, and you can do all sorts of those different distressing techniques. If you don't want to, it's perfect. Now, we've got lots of choices when it comes to top coats. Black wax, clear wax, white wax, gilding waxes. The other thing that I like to do is to make glazes. I do have 2 different glazes here.
Bronze.
It's bronze. Pretty.
Ooh, that would probably look
very
good.
pretty.
Gold.
Yeah. Here's a board just used to show. So we're doing the black wax, at least for the top coat. Gloves.
Also, something to keep in mind if you're using all these different types, if you want to have different brushes for each one so you don't have to keep cleaning them out, that's probably a good idea. You can use the cheaper ones that you buy. You can buy a pack of, I think, what is it, like 5 of them at Walmart for like $10.
Exactly.
And you can just use one for each one. And that way they're specialized for that part.
Those kids' cheap painting brushes, you cut the bristles in half. It works good for wax brushes for these gilding waxes, or use your finger. One brush that's special for my dark waxes and colored waxes, that's this one here. This is the same bristle as the paintbrush, it's just shorter, so it's a very dense, oh my goodness, there's so many bristles. It's a very dense brush. Now I don't clean this. You'd use a little soap and water, you can get all the wax out, which is nice, but you don't have to. So a black wax, we'll do that to it. Okay, you can lessen that effect. You can lessen that effect by, once you do that, you just take a
sponge or paper.
Yeah, sponge or rag or whatever, yeah. And actually, so that it's only lightly black wax. So that's one of the effects. White wax on this whiteboard's not going to show up, but it does the same thing. So you have those choices. The gilding wax, instead you can use your finger with the gilding wax and put it on, and it will add a light.
I can't really see.
A little bit of color.
Right there.
Yeah, and it's you can add it a little thicker, just gouge it out and you just add it on a little thicker. It's really good for doing the edges of things, and you have several different colors. Okay. Oh, and the glazes. Got two different glazes here. This one here is a white. And so how you make your own colored glaze, you can use the glazes that they have, or you get a clear, either the top coat, you get the liquid patina, you can get the poly. These were actually made with just a basic poly. Oops. You can actually do a clear wax and make your own colored wax too. So that's actually nice. But this one here was made using Dixie Belle cotton with a poly, and what else did I add to this? No, I think that's all it is. This is just a plain white glaze. You mix a very, 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 very small bit of white paint, or paint in general, in with the poly. A little bit goes a long way. So this is probably about a 5% white mix, white paint mix with the poly. So, and then I added a little bit of water to thin it down, because otherwise it's like concrete. To put this one on, I like to use the sponge to put glazes on. You can use brushes as well. That's a choice. You can also use a brayer if you want texture. The only brayer's not going to work on here because all you'll get is just vertical stripes. So the other glaze that I have that I think is really glorious, I was mixing up for demonstration, is this one here. Oh, separated a little bit. This is using a copper metallic paint, a little bit of Queen Bee from DIY, the copper metallics from Dixie Belle, and a little bit of water, and poly. Yeah, it's got a touch of poly in it too. Or no, it's got a touch of big top in it. And so this one looks like that.
Has a little tan color to it. Yeah,
it's kind of coppery, light coppery tone. And I thought that one would look really good over the top of that as well. So you've got choices. What do you want to do? Or we can make a brand spanking new different glaze.
Is there a metallic in that?
I do not have a metallic in this, but we do have silver out there. I can get a silver and put in it. You can also do a pearlescent glaze.
That'd probably look really good.
A pearlescent?
With the marble.
Pearlescent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I haven't opened a pearlescent, so we can just get one off the shelf.
You can try that one too. Well, I don't want to open something if you haven't opened it.
Let's use it on something. Let's see.
Would that look good, the coppery tones with the gray, you think?
I think so. Let's get...
If not, I'll just repaint it.
Yeah.
That's the glory in it, huh?
That's definitely the glory in it. That's what it looked like if you do a glaze over the green.
I don't know. Let's just do it. Let's wing it and see what happens.
Okay. Now, do you want to do a solid glazing? So this is another choice. Do you want to do a solid glazing or a spongy glaze?
Spongy.
Spongy? Okay. So
I like texture.
Right. So when doing a glaze on these pieces, and especially with a textured glaze, you don't want to make it even.
Right.
Because then it's like, oh, look at that. That's very even. So you want to give it an idea. So one of my favorite things to do is to do it heavy on one side and then lighter as you go, or heavy and then lighter.
Right.
And so it kind of blends it.
Okay.
That's an idea. You can do it in all over, or you can do it like where it just kind of is like marble. In this particular case, you're dealing with marble, so you could just kind of deal it with it's like it's in a line, a spongy in a line, that sort of thing. There's the sponge. Doesn't matter which side. There's not enough black wax on there to worry about it. And then the easiest thing to do, actually, moist sponge is a good idea too. Not too moist. You don't want the glaze to drip everywhere, but a little bit moister sponge helps to smooth the paint a little bit. And then you just take a little bit of your glaze and you just put it on there, and then you just kind of get it into the sponge, like, because you want to fold the sponge in half. You want to kind of move it around so you don't have a glob of your paint on one side of the sponge. Excuse the chair, it's creaking under the mass that's sitting on it. And then you just put it on there in whatever pattern you want.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. See, I think that looks good. And you could do a combination of sponge and streak, so you can actually just kind of go through and on some parts of it with the sponge. Oh, you need a little bit more glaze. So when you run out of glaze, you just do the same thing. You put a little glaze on the sponge, you work it into the sponge. Now, when you go over,
can't see any of that.
No, you can show them anyway. When you go over sections, you get heavier. So you want to go over first and then let it dry a little, and then come back over if you want sections that have the thicker glaze coat or color. And so that's actually looking really good. We're getting this nice kind of marbly appearance here. On the leg, you got this green, but then it's accented by this kind of coppery feel to it. Now I've got to watch her do this because I got to replicate it on the other one so that we have matching pieces. Now you don't want to get too much glaze on your sponge because you'll have globs of it. And if you want a nice texture, you just have a little bit on your, like I put half a spoon on that, and you just put half a spoon on there and work it until it's gone, and then you put another half spoon on there, and it'll go by a lot faster than you think. The hardest part is prepping the piece, not painting.
That's the part that everyone skips because they don't want to do the work.
A lot of people skip the prepping, and that's a bad idea. You will have so many fewer issues and tears, and you don't have to do much prep with chalk paint, but you do have to do some. You do have to clean your piece, and you do have to make sure that it's going to be enough of a surface that the paint's going to stick to it. But you don't have to strip it. There's a difference there. With latex paint, you can't do this. You don't have to strip your piece. You don't have to make sure there's absolutely no poly or anything on there. The chalk paint, the properties of the chalk paint allow you to paint over poly, but you do still have some prep work to do. You can't just flat out start painting a piece and expect it to stay put where you want it if you haven't prepped the piece properly the first time. Did I say enough piece?
I think so.
Yeah.
Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers.
They're pepper peppers. Oh my goodness.
We like those.
Spicy peppers.
That's right.
So it's not an even coat. It's not meant to be. Just have to get every surface at least a little bit, because otherwise it'll look like you've missed a spot. And you can do an additional clear coat over the top of this, and you have it doubly protected if you want. Let's do one little tiny, do a couple of spots where it's a little stronger. So just dab that in a couple spots. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. So notice what she just did. I put it on there. She didn't move it into the sponge, which was good. That's what she wanted to do. And she put it on. It was a little too heavy, the first one. And so she's using the other end of the sponge to kind of get it off a little bit. That's exactly what you want to do. One thing to keep in mind is that if you make a mistake, just work around it. You don't need to take the piece all the way down to fix the issue.
The hardest part for any painter or artist to get around is the fact that if you make a mistake, you really just focus on that one mistake, and you just need to turn it into something else. Turn it into,
make it part of the project.
Yeah.
You'll find out, especially with old furniture, you're not going to get it to look exactly like you want.
Oh no. The vision is never what the end result is, ever. I am
So
all too familiar with that one.
So I always suggest you pick your base color. Pick your base color. Be prepared to pick your base color. But don't be prepared to finish it in the colors that you expect. You have a general idea of what you want to do, that's great. But always be aware you may have to change it up.
You have any touches?
I think that looks good. You got a couple of brighter tones, a couple of lesser tones. You still have that collard green coming through, but now turn your piece around. Oh, yeah, looks like a thumbprint. So you want to turn your piece around, check it from every angle because that's, you know, especially when you're
blobbies and runnies and drippies.
Yep, and you're going to miss spots and everything. So a good turntable is a nice idea. The only turntable I have is huge. So
I am not. I'm turning it just fine.
So the last step to make sure that you did everything right is to put it upright again if you have it upside down so that you see it from the top, just in case you miss some of those top surfaces. So of course you got to be careful not to touch anything. Got it?
Yeah.
It dries fast, but
oh yeah, see?
so in this particular case, we had this upper surface right here that wasn't touched very much, and so it needs just a little bit of dabbing, and you can use whatever's on the sponge. Is it good?
Like it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. See, the copper looks good over that.
Yeah.
And so now it'll dry. It takes about 10 minutes to dry. Generally, what you want to do anytime you're putting a glaze coat on is you want to wait a few hours. Even though it's going to dry quickly, it still has a lot of water in it. This was painted yesterday, so it was prepared to glaze today. So if you have 2 or 3 projects going, you paint them, you wait the next day, you finish them. There you go. And once you're done glazing it, you can take the tape off and you're done.
And this concludes another edition of what we're doing. What we're doing with Carly and Cassie.
Yeah, there you go. So goodbye from Belton, South Carolina. Hope we're having a good day. It sounds like it's raining here, which is awesome for someone who loves winter, which is, well, I'm not sure why I'm in the South.
You gotta love rain if you're down here this summer. It's monsoon season this year.
It's been rainy for this last year, so it's been kind of nice. I say that from everybody glaring at me who hates the rain down here.
We don't hate the rain. We hate what comes with the rain. Anyway.
Flooding. It's nothing like the desert. You're kicking me. Why are you kicking me?
I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, y'all have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back next time with something else fun to do.
Indeed. Have fun.
Hi guys, I'm Cassie from PS Relics, and I'm here to show you the final product on our marble top side tables. And then we also used a brush. Hold on one second. This big fancy brush right here. It's got black wax on it, and we, kind of put it on the edges here to give it a little low, effect there to make it look kind of more aged. And we think that they turned out really well. These will be for sale at Standpipe Antiques. So if you guys want to come down and pick these up, they're Carlene and Cassie exclusives here. And just stay tuned and we'll show you what else we're working on.